Before we start this show, just a word from our sponsor, 20 by 20 Apparel. Founded in 2015, 20 by 20 Apparel brings original tributes to pro wrestling's classic arenas, moments, and events. They look to spotlight the bloopers, bleeps, and body slams along with the biggest, smallest, strangest, and strongest that pro wrestling has had to offer. Along with their awesome line of pro wrestling apparel, they do offer many services. In the world of wrestling, there are hundreds of shirts, promotions, flyers, social media accounts, and ads. Don't get lost in the sea of parody shirts and display fonts. They can provide professional graphic design services at a reasonable price. 20 by 20 also hand screen prints all the tees in-house. If you would like to discuss possible run of tees, posters, koozies, foam fingers, or whatever, drop them a line. Go to 20 by 20 Apparel. That's the number 20x, the number 20 apparel.com. Now, let's get to the show.
Fresh is the word.
I'm Jim Duggan, got long wood for plenty hoes. I keep it fresher than fresh, but you already know. You suckers bum me, I'm money, I got a ton of flows. My weed loud like a motherfucking thunder roll. Your shit quiet like you ballin' on a budget though. We see your kicks and we laugh and yellin' what are those? You see me shining like a suit on puffy. You know my grind and shit is too strong, buddy. That's why the dude call money. I be stuntin' like it's nothing at all, cause it's nothing to me. It's probably something to y'all. Trying to smoke like me, then come and fuck with your dog. Got a closet full of kicks, you can't cop it them all. And I'm fresher than the freshest, you can tell it's in my essence. Bitch, you see the way I'm rapping, yes I do this shit to death. I tell I'm running out of breath, I tell somebody cut a check. But either way you know it's fresh, and either way you know it's fresh. Fresh, we fresh. Fresh, 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 goddammit, we fresh. Fresh, fresh, goddammit, we so damn fresh.
Welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. And on Fresh is the Word, we like to deliver wisdom through great stories from the minds of bright creatives of pop culture. Through those stories, we like to dissect the journey of our guests and present actionable lessons and advice for our listeners, no matter what career or avenue of artistry they pursue. And before we get into this episode, I want to give a shout out to Knox Money, Bang Belushi, and Foul Mouth for the theme music for Fresh is the Word. And if you would like to support the podcast, you can always go to freshasthepodcast.com and just share any of the links for any of the episodes on any of your social media platforms. And also, you can subscribe to Fresh is the Word pretty much anywhere that podcasts are streamed. And that includes Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, pretty much everywhere. And please rate and review, especially on Apple Podcasts. It will definitely help out the show. If you want to contact me, you can always reach me by email at djkfresh@gmail.com, or you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at KFresh is the Word, and on Facebook at facebook.com/KFresh. And you can also follow Fresh is the Word on Twitter at Fresh is the Word, and that's is with an IZ, Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, and Facebook at facebook.com/Fresh is the Podcast. And this is episode 140. And this episode's guest is comic book artist and creator of Karnal Confessions, Sorah Suhng. Currently, Suhng is running an already highly successful Kickstarter for Karnal Confessions, an illustrated prose project that she originally offered up for free online at karnalconfessions.com. But now she's making it available in print with all sorts of goodies. During our conversation, we talked about how Karnal Confessions came to be and her inspirations behind the characters, her creative beginnings, her audience, how personal relationships affected her projects, and much, much more. And before we get into this interview with Sorah Suhng, I just want to remind you that if you go to patreon.com/freshastheword, you can help me out a lot by pledging a little bit of pocket change each month to help with the costs of doing this podcast. As little as $1, you can help each month. And if you pledge $3, you can help me out more, and you'll get all sorts of digital goodies, including the Patreon-only podcast episodes of interviews from my vaults. So that's patreon.com/fresh is the word. All right, let's get on to the interview with Sorah Suhng. Yeah, I first came about your work. It just kind of popped up somewhere. I guess people retweeting or sharing your work. You seem to be very popular. Right now, you do have a Kickstarter going on for Karnal Confessions, and it's going very, very well. Kind of talk about this title and what you're doing with the Kickstarter.
Well, Karnal Confessions is a story that I've been brewing around in my head since I was probably about 19. So it's been quite a while. I mean, it's been a long time developing. And I didn't always want to tell this story, but as I got older, I was like, okay, I think I have the wherewithal to do it. And also the market's changed where something like this is a little bit more acceptable. Believe it or not, I would not categorize the story as of yet to, I joke around saying that like, oh yeah, I'm a smut peddler, but it's actually not that. I'm a huge sci-fi nerd, so it's actually more of my love song to science fiction. And just framed within this kind of, bad girl way. And I'd always wanted to tell a story that was from the villain's perspective that was completely unapologetic. A lot of times stories end up turning the villains into anti-heroes or like, oh, they end up doing the good thing at the end of the day. But I was like, well, what about the villain that literally just nothing ever, their perspective doesn't necessarily change. They think that what they're doing is right, and therefore, why would they deviate from that? So like the moral code is different. And so anyhow, I had no idea how readers or my audience was going to respond to it. So I offered it up for free, chapter by chapter each month for a year. And then as my audience grew, I decided, okay, I'm going to throw it into a Kickstarter. And because it's illustrated prose, it's not necessarily a pure comic. I mean, you definitely get comic book length worth of artwork in it, but a lot of it is written word. And so I had no idea how that was going to do with my audience. And obviously they responded very well to it. So I'm very, very happy about that.
Like you mentioned that maybe at another time, people might not be open towards a story like this. What do you feel like changed?
Well, I mean, it's, well, for one, I definitely, and I talk about this pretty openly, I thought when I was first going to do this story, I was like, well, this will be an easy sell for guys because it's a hot blonde in a, pseudo dominatrix outfit, and who doesn't love that? But I actually thought it was going to be a harder sell for women. And what I found was the way that I wrote Karnal, I kind of turned her accidentally into a female power fantasy. And so the industry as a whole is much more female friendly now than it was when I first started this industry in 2007. And I mean, I was like 20 years old and didn't know anything, but so the industry as a whole is more female friendly. I mean, there's room to improve, but we are definitely more friendly now. And I think women are hungry for something like that. And this is kind of a perspective that I wouldn't say it hasn't ever been told before. I just think the nature in which I'm telling it hasn't been told before. So I think that culturally, women are a little bit more empowered to enjoy the things they want to enjoy unapologetically. And then also sex is less of a taboo now. So having a character named Karnal Sin, it's like, obviously there's going to be some, at the very least, sexual innuendo in there. So I think people are much more open to it now. And plus, I do have to say, I mean, things like, because obviously there's definitely like a bit of a kink bondage theme to her, and that's going to come into play much stronger in the next arc. But I'm resting on the shoulder, or I'm standing on the shoulders of the people who came before me. So including like the Sajiks and their Sunstone over at Top Cow, and even I don't want to be insulting, but the less than accurate 50 Shades of Grey. So I try not to be disparaging. So, but yeah. So I think that the atmosphere has changed for this.
This character, this story, how do you feel like it's empowering to women? Why did the women kind of get attracted to the story?
Well, for one is that I definitely made it so that she, I mean, in the little trailer video that I do for the thing, it's pretty accurate. She is a boss bitch lady, and she doesn't care, and she makes really kind of normally if men were to make those decisions, be it in real life or entertainment, then it's not seen as something egregious, but because it's a woman doing all of a sudden, it's scandalous. And so she doesn't give a shit. She has no shame in her physical form. She doesn't have any shame in the power that she wants and craves. She has no shames in her sexual appetites or anything. And so I feel that a lot of women we've constantly had to bite our tongue, or we've had to demur to sometime in our life, we've had to deal with that kind of, or expectation to that, even if we didn't do it or wanted to do it. And so to have a woman who just absolutely will not do that because she has her agenda and she's going to fulfill her agenda, and to hell with the consequences, that is, and not to mention, I mean, she is powerful. So, I mean, she literally could kill somebody. So it's, and she has no qualms about doing that. There's no struggle. There's no internal struggle for her to go like, oh, should I kill this person? She's like, no, fuck you. I'm going to kill you and be done with it. So I think just the shamelessness, quote unquote, in the context of our reality, where women are still in a way expected to be a bit more demure, a bit more, quote unquote, the fairer sex, as it were. It's a power fantasy, kind of like how the Hulk serves as the ultimate male power fantasy, right? Where he can just rage the F out, and it's like, and that's what's like really satisfying about him. Even though, yes, we all know it's not necessarily right. Like, he shouldn't be destroying everything, but at the same time, it feels good.
Right.
Yeah.
With a story like Karnal Confessions, how do you feel like you're sort of fitting into this progressing world where more women are being a part of being comic book artists, authors, editors? Where do you want this to progress?
Well, I mean, I personally don't necessarily have a quote unquote female agenda. Like I said, Karnal was kind of an accident in the sense that I just happened to write it that way, and I didn't even think about it. It wasn't until my beta readers actually started talking to me about how, it was coming off to them, and I was like, oh, oops, like it. I wanted to tell the story that I wanted to tell, which was an interesting and fun story, and something that internalized social mores that like I said, that I've personally dealt with, and so I thought it'd be fun to write about it. On a broader scope of things, it's actually funny. I have a lot of young female fans because I've done some work with the amazing Jeremy Whitley on Princeless and Raven the Pirate Princess, and so this is definitely not geared towards the young ones. This is definitely geared towards the adult readers. It's like I was telling my best friend, who's she's actually my editor, JT Seams, and I said, you're my target audience, and she's my age. So, excuse me. And so, I think I'm hoping that as a heavily female-led book, which again was completely accidental, because I'm a woman, Kate Colors is a woman, JT Seams is a woman, obviously, and Ghost Cliff is actually having a woman. She's going to be the one who's going to be formatting this. I'm really hoping that it normalizes. I don't want how do I word this? I don't necessarily want it to be an agenda-driven thing, but if something were to come out of it, then it's like, oh, women can talk about sex too, and it's totally fine, and we don't have to hyper-explain ourselves or anything. Like there's no reason for us to explain. We can just express, if that makes any sense.
No, it totally does. The story behind how this kind of came about, like you saying it's basically just something you worked on, but it was like an accident that it kind of flourished. That is basically, normalizing it, that there wasn't any sort of big agenda that you had in your head. It was just a story you wanted to tell, and it happened. What when it comes to this character, she's a villain, and as it says on your Kickstarter, no apologies, no shame, no mercy. This is her story. How do you feel like this? Is there any ways that this character sort of is parallel to anything in real life, in real society right now?
Um, I mean, God, that's a good question. Um, excuse me. Well, I would argue that women as a whole, sociologically, have been baring their teeth more. I wouldn't necessarily call them villainous, and um, but they have been baring their teeth more. Like I said, socially, politically, creatively, and so I guess you can make that parallel. But really, I literally, I remember some, I won't drop names or anything, but I had an editor ask me years ago, like literally I was 21, and what is the story that you want to tell? And I said, I want to tell the story of a villain, like about the villains unapologetically, blah, 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 blah. And so that was, over a decade ago. So I don't know if this is necessarily something that's paralleling right now or like inspired by. It's just something that I decided that I think, everybody has such a love affair with villains, myself included. Some of my favorite some of my favorite characters are technically villains, especially in the, Gotham Batman universe. So like, and most of the fans that I've talked to, they've shared that same sentiment with me. Like they love diving into what makes that person tick and why are they this way and blah, 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 blah. So I figured that this was a risk worth taking to see whether or not it would pan out and work.
Yeah, extending on that, why do you feel like people love a villain, and why does everybody want to sort of dive in more into the head of what a villain is, and how did that contribute to making this character Karnal?
Well, I have a degree in psychology, so definitely right up my alley for this.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. I can say from a personal experience as to why I got into psychology to begin with was because I came from a not ideal background in terms of my home life. And so when I was very young, I desperately wanted to understand why stuff was happening in my family. And so that's how I got interested in psychology, and I studied it, avidly from the age of basically 11 on. And I think there's an inherent desire for people to understand how other people tick. And when people are quote unquote abnormal, then they become more fascinating. It's why people are fascinated with, serial killers, and why true crimes or, true crime documentaries and things like that are so intriguing, because you're like, what was it that made them that messed them up so bad that they are this vehemently against the norm? Because I think all of us are against the norm in our own ways, in small ways.
Yeah.
But we're not like off the deep end. You look at that new trailer for the Joker movie and everyone's intrigued, going, okay, obviously they got like a Norman Bates thing going on, like what's happening? And that's what's intriguing, is because we all need an explanation. Humans all suffer from a desire to categorize, and so in psychology, there's a thing called schemas. And when you don't know what something is, you desperately try to fit it into a box that you know exists. So if
Right.
you've never seen a bear, but you see a giant dog, you might, but you've seen big dogs, you might look at a bear and say, oh my God, that's a big dog, instead of thinking it's a bear, because you don't know any better. So to understand, the psychotic, to understand the abnormal would, it gives a sense of comfort to us to be able to say, okay, we can box that up. We know what it is. We know it causes that. And I think that's people's fascination with villains. Plus, I personally believe, just on a creative level and a fan level, is that villains tend to be more interesting for me because they are able to walk the moral line as they see fit, whereas a hero is forced to stick on that line to maintain being a hero.
Kind of going back, what kind of a kid were you, and when did you first start getting into, wanting to be a creative person?
Well, I had an older sister and an older brother, and my sister was definitely very creative. My mother was also an artist. So in terms of storytelling, it started pretty young, just on a vague level. On a more in-depth level, I actually was I was a tabletop role player and then a live action role player when I was like 12, 13, 14, somewhere around there. Well, in that age range. And I also played text-based RPGs. So I was constantly writing characters and telling stories and playing video games where I would tell stories in the video games. Professionally, it didn't really start until initially when I got into comics, it was because I was playing a video game that was based on superheroes. And then I happened to stumble across the Top Cow website because Top Cow was publishing the City Heroes comic book at the time. And I think David Nakayama was doing covers for it. I don't remember. I could be wrong about that. But anyhow, I didn't know anything about comics beyond. I knew the X-Men because I'd watched the cartoons and I had read some comic books when I was much younger, but I had drifted away from it and turned more into a gamer. And then I got back into comic books when I was about 18 years old. And then and I was like, oh my God, I want to be able to draw like this. I saw artwork from Michael Turner and Mark Silvestri, and I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. And then I just thought I wanted to draw comics for a long time until I had my first mentor, Bob Layton. And, he taught me a million things. And one of the things that he taught me is that as an artist, we are a slave to the story. And so that really put the sense of storytelling on a higher pedestal for me. That was very much drilled into me that storytelling and telling stories is what this medium is about. It's not just about pretty artwork. It's not just about, the pinups and whatever. So there has to be good, juicy content attached to whatever artwork that you have. And I think, so I was probably about 20 years old when I was like, okay, I really want to take this onto the next level.
Yeah, you mentioned about having a mentor, and that's been something I've been very interested in that topic recently. What do you think makes a good mentor for you?
That's a loaded question. Excuse me. Well, I mean, I was very much. I think I was one of the last, maybe not the last, but one of the last people to have a traditional comic book mentor apprentice relationship, in the sense that it's not really done that way anymore. As far as I know, I don't know. I've not heard of anybody really even having art assistants anymore, not unless they're working in a studio and they happen to have somebody there as their assistant. But one, nobody really works in studios anymore. Everyone works from home. So it used to be the norm that you would pass on your knowledge to somebody, who had the skills that you were developing, and you would introduce them to people. That was the payoff. You got a little bit of money and you got all this teaching. You would help them save time, and then they would use their vast network of professional establishment to introduce you to editors and to publishers and blah, blah, blah. And that's how it used to be done and how a lot of my initial network was done. But so now, I guess not so much, because the internet has completely changed the scope of the industry. I mean, we have amazing artists, in freaking Singapore who've never, left their house, who are like, huge, big name artists now and writers. So I think for me at this point, not only did I get a lot of art guidance as I was younger, but I also got a lot of business guidance because my mentors were all publishers, which was awesome, actually. And they were all previous editors as well as being artists. So I think I'd still want more of, if I were to have a mentor right now, I would still want more of a business side, mentorship than anything else. Because, it's one thing I tell young women who come up to me at cons and they talk to me like, I really want to be an artist. What do I do? And I tell them, I said, listen, you will always become a better artist if you just keep drawing every day. No matter what, you will force yourself into improvement. You can find all the tips and tricks and whatever with tutorials, either for free or with a Patreon online. I'm like, you have access to that kind of skill development now. What you really need to take are business courses. So I tell them, I was like, when you go to college, take business, take marketing, learn how to market yourself, learn how to run a business, because you are running yourself as a business. So that's what I would recommend as being a really good mentor, I guess.
Yeah, extending upon that, right now, as we do this interview, you have over 500 backers for your Kickstarter, and it's gone super well. How do you feel like you were able to garner this sort of community for your work?
I'm still floored, honestly. Like, we were at my manager and I were at C2E2, days before we launched this Kickstarter, and everyone kept asking us, "Oh, are you excited?" And we were like, "Well, we're nervous." And I was like, "I have no idea how this is going to go." I thought, okay, I think I'm confident that I can raise, the initial $5,000 just to publish the damn thing. I was like, that doesn't seem crazy to me. And I was like, anything beyond that, I have no idea. So to be at, I think we're at what, 42 now, almost at 43.
Yeah.
To be at $42,000 is a little, it's overwhelming because I genuinely wasn't expecting it. Like, I mean, I have friends who are sitting there, "Oh, you'll make, blah, 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 you'll blow past this." And I'm just like, yeah, okay, you have no idea. Because as I said earlier, I mean, this whole format was a gamble for me. I thought people might balk at the idea that this was, mostly prose with artwork interspersed into it, but people seem to be very gung-ho about it. And I mean, we didn't fly blindly into the night. We definitely consulted with some of the great Kickstarter campaigns and companies, including the amazing and wonderful Brian Polito of Lady Death and Coffin Comics. I mean, he's like, the king of kings on that one. So him and Fran have been incredibly helpful. And same with my buddy Ron Zabala over at Patriotica, and Jamie Tyndall with White Widow. So what's really great is that the community seems to be very supportive with one another in terms of on the creative side of things. So we've all been we're all contributing to each other, and it's been really great. So in terms of garnering this kind of attention on the campaign, I don't know. I mean, other than I pushed it over at Emerald City Comic Con and C2E2, the 2 weekends before the launch. But I mean, I only have 3,000 something odd friends on Facebook, and I have, over 5,000 followers on my art page, which sounds like a lot, but you look at some of these other people and it's not. Like, I mean,
right.
Some of my artist friends have, 18, 25 plus thousand followers, and I'm like, I don't have that. So, I like to think that it's because it's a cool concept. It's not really been done or championed before. I have no idea. I honestly couldn't tell you, other than I have an amazing apparatus of creative friends who they all shared it, and they contributed their artwork, they contributed their expertise, and then they shared it across their network, and that really has helped a lot. So that's all I can think of.
Yeah, there is a new thing, kind of a new concept that's been coming out lately, where you mentioned that you only have like a few thousand followers on your social medias. There's been this idea that there's people who have like tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands, but they don't really have any influence with their social media. Where you have these people who have only like a few thousand, but they know everybody that follows them are like sort of diehard people,
right?
And they're like called like micro influencers. So it sounds like, everything you've been saying with, when you put out this story, for free, people, kind of gravitated towards it, and they came over for the Kickstarter. How do you feel? Is there a way that you've been able to, do you feel like, connect personally with your audience that maybe lend itself to the success of this whole journey with this story?
Well, I mean, on a basic level, there is, there's the marketing side of an artist, of a creator. And I listen to I can't necessarily call them mentors because I'm not in a actual mentoring relationship with them, but I do like to listen to people who come before me. And so there are certain things, for example, like I personally have no problem with nudity on a book, for example, or nudity in a book, and there is nudity in this book.
Yeah.
But one thing that J. Scott Campbell, who's awesome, everyone knows who he is. We were at a dinner one time and we were discussing work, just business in general, and he threw out the line about you got to keep things PG-13.
because if you keep things PG-13, then you're going to have a broader audience. So most people tend to not really care about in context nudity when you're in the book or story itself, or even sex, for that example. But some people do balk at, you know, quote unquote, the nudie covers kind of thing. I personally don't care, and I love drawing nudity and would have no problem doing it. But it's like, you know, it's the marketability aspect of it for me and for what I want to do. And so there's things like that. And then there's also what was the other thing that they said? Oh man, I'm totally blanking on the second one, and it was from Brian nonetheless. Anyways, but yeah, so there's certain parts of how I'm approaching it. So fans will come up to me a lot of times and they'll say, "I love the way that you draw sexy women because you draw them. They don't look gross, quote unquote." And I'm like, okay, and they expand on that. And these are coming from women, and they're coming from men and gay men and whatever. Is that sexuality doesn't have to be pornographic.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, and by no means am I saying, like, I will actually use Lady Death as an example of where sexuality is not pornographic and where sexuality is part of the character, and it works very, very well for her, and it's empowering and sexy and wonderful. But there is a certain style of sexiness where it lends away from sensuality into, you know, kind of porn, and which is fine, to each their own. It's just that that's not marketable across the board. That's not keeping things open to everybody, right? So men can like, you know, straight men can like a sensual figure, and so can women, gay or otherwise. Women can both like that as well. Whereas if it's pornographic, culturally, I feel like a lot of times the general swath of women are going to be a little turned off to it, just because it's like, oh, it's a little too what's the word, crass or blunt. It's not insinuating. I don't know. So I think keeping things accessible has helped, and I try to respond to everybody. Is my rule of thumb, like on social media. I don't always get to it, but like even on like my birthday, you know how you get hundreds of birthday wishes. I just couldn't do it this year because I was driving home from Chicago, but every year I try to literally respond to every single person, just because I have no idea what I could potentially mean to somebody.
Right.
And so I want to make sure that I always have my best face forward. So Jim Steranko told my mentor, who told me years ago, you know, you need to dress well at a con. Always look like you're successful, even if you're not, because nobody wants to go to a convention to see their hero dressed as a schlub. So, and like not succeeding because they idolize you. And I'm like, I'm not saying that I'm somebody to be idolized. I'm saying I have no idea if somebody does. Therefore, it's kind of like I used to, and I don't know if this is gonna be funny. This is funny to some people. I used to be a cheerleader back in the day when I was in high school. So I was captain. And so like I remember my coach was from Texas, and she was like, "You are a representative of this school, and that means at all times you have to be smiling. I don't care if you're depressed. I don't care if you're PMSing. You have to have a smile on your face 100% of the time, no matter what. On campus, off campus, in civilian clothes or otherwise. You are now a representation." And I was like, okay, that's a little insane, but it's kind of like that. Where it's I don't know how, I mean, yes, we're human, but I have no idea how I'm coming off to somebody else. And I want to make sure that I'm at least making an effort to come off well. And I think that's garnered a decent amount of a positive association with me, I guess. Same goes with my social media posts, where it's like I really avoid talking about really negative things. And if I do discuss something that's quote unquote negative, I try to put a positive spin on it. Just because I genuinely believe that there's enough negativity in the world, and we don't need to be contributing to that. I don't need to be contributing to that. So somebody else can take that burden, not me.
Right. Is there anything else that, you know, outside of Karnal Confessions that you're working on or have worked on recently that, you know, have seen the light of day recently?
Yeah. Let's see. Well, I wasn't on this Lady Death campaign, I don't think, except possibly in one of the interiors. But I have done recently. Was it Hell Witch came out relatively recently through Coffin Comics. Also, I'm a current series that's being published by Action Lab called The Null Fairies, written by Chad Ciccone. Ciccone? I never know. I think it is Ciccone. I think he corrected me, but that's like the proper way to say it. But Chad Ciccone's written it and drawn it, and I did the beat covers for the books. And there's 6 issues. There's going to be 6 issues in this first run, and the whole thing was like depending on how it went, they were going to do more. So it looks like it's doing well, so that's exciting. But I think issue 3 is coming out this month. Maybe today's what, the 5th? It might have already come out. It might be next week. I'm not sure. But the 3rd issue is coming out, so that'll be out. And there's another Kickstarter that's going to be launching on April, I think the 18th. But that's sometime around that area, like plus or minus 2 days. During International Princess Week, I did all the character art for a card game called Charmed and Dangerous.
Okay.
It's all these empowered fairy tale princesses where it's a cooperative game and you get to battle all the evil villains and whatever. But that one is I think that one's going to do really, really well. It's by Third World Studios, and my friend David Rodriguez approached me about it to start on a couple years ago. All the colors are by Sanju Nivingune. I have no idea, Sanju, if I said your name wrong just then. Please don't hate me. No, so that's coming out, and then I think for now that and then I'm currently, I don't know when it's actually going to come out, but I'm currently doing page work for Action Lab Entertainment with the writer David Schechter for a book called The Righteous Knight, which is a fun comedy fish out of water story. So, and I think that's all that's currently slated. So I'm busy.
Right. Sounds like you're busy. Got a successful Kickstarter. A lot of other projects in the works. Sounds good.
Gotta always be hustling. You know, it's crazy. You actually sound like my writer friend David Schechter. It's kind of freaking me out, actually. I'm gonna have him listen to this just so I could be like, you sound like this dude.
Yeah. This might be my I just woke up a little bit voice, but it might be a little deeper than regularly, but yeah. But okay. If there was somebody listening to this podcast that isn't really into comic books, or even if they are into comic books, like what sort of nugget of knowledge about your life or career could anybody listening to this interview sort of take from your life or career and sort of project it into their own?
Well, I started into comics when I was pretty young. I was 20, and then I took my opportunities for granted. I was young. I didn't understand. Like, I just didn't. I was just, I always say I was a 22-year-old fucktard is always usually what I end up saying. And then I left comics, and I didn't come back until 2016. I was still in my 20s, but I was like 29, I think. And that's when I started to take my career seriously. So I had taken a pretty long, like a 5-year break from working professionally, and then I came back. With a massive life change. I'd gone through a divorce, and that it gave me the fuel to really prove to myself that I could do this and do this the right way as a proper adult, as somebody who understood and appreciated the industry, appreciated the medium, and appreciated the adult responsibilities, as it were. So I think ultimately it's never too late to change gears. It's never too late to pursue, but you have to take it seriously. You can't half-ass it. You got to really go for it. Take the risk.
Good. That's you mentioned, and I don't really want to get into your personal life or anything,
sure.
But you mentioned that you went back into all of this after divorce, and I've noticed a lot of times that after a woman will get out of a relationship or get out of divorce or get out of a hard relationship, they will go balls deep into a project, something to change their life. From a woman's perspective, why is that? Why does a woman need to do that?
Well, I can't speak for all women, but I know that for a lot of my friends who've gone through divorces, and obviously including myself, is that we end up marrying for the wrong reasons or the wrong guy or woman for that matter. And usually, in my experience, again, it's anecdotal, is that those relationships end up being very controlling, and we feel that our personal wants and desires are sacrificed for theirs. And so when we get out of those relationships, it's a call to arms. It's kind of like, okay, well, now it's just me, and now I can prove to myself that those complaints that I had during that relationship, that I was being stifled or oppressed or controlled, wasn't just me running my mouth. I'm going to prove that I can actually do it. And had this person been supportive, they could have been along the ride with me. So for me, it was definitely, because my ex-husband was never supportive of my art career ever. Or creatively, he definitely wanted me to quote unquote be normal. And so so when I got out of that, I was hell bent on saying, little middle finger, and I can do this, and I don't need you to help me to do this. So I think anytime somebody goes through any kind of a breakup, focusing on work is actually a really great outlet for that kind of energy that you have, because it's an antsy kind of anxious, angry, scared almost energy, because whatever was the comfort zone that you were in previous in that relationship is no longer there. So now you have all this pent up energy, and you have nowhere to direct it. So it's good to focus it on work, I think. And I think that's probably why a lot of women end up doing that, my ass included.
And I know Karnal Confessions isn't necessarily geared towards a younger audience, but just your work in general, what do you hope a younger, female audience gets out of just, what you're doing in general?
Well, actually, I don't see why it's adult themed. Obviously there are adult themes, but as it stands right now, this particular arc is not terribly, quote unquote graphic. It's not like it's not like it's an actual romance novel or anything along those lines, right? So although, there's definitely flowery language, but there was a discussion that I was having on a friend's wall on Facebook months ago that was talking about, for example, gay characters and how gay characters are portrayed in media. And I said, I'm a bisexual woman, and I said, okay, well, what if, I was like, I don't think that we should shy away from having these minority characters as being the broad, having this broad range of character traits. So yes, you can have the hero, or you can have the villain, or you can have the coward, or you can have the badass soldier. It shouldn't just be all positive. And then there was an argument given to me, and I understand the perspective too. It's sticky, is that, well, minorities or these oppressed people have been represented as being negative for so long in our media that now we have to swing the pendulum the other way. And I think I don't necessarily like the pendulum swinging. I think that we should break the pendulum off and just say we can have everything. We could have it all, not to quote Adele, but we could. And so with this, it's like, okay, well, here's a Karnal is a woman. She is everything that a woman can be and could be and maybe shouldn't be, but she's got a wide breadth of range, and that allows for, not only is there a truly good hero, Wonder Woman and Captain Marvels and things like that. Okay, well, now guess what? Now a woman can actually be evil and not looking for redemption. There can it's almost like how Harley Quinn used to be, in the sense that she was messed up and deranged, and she wasn't necessarily doing it for any kind of redemption purposes, right? She had her own selfish reasons. And I think that it's okay for women to be selfish. And if young women want to look at this and they say, we can have a broad range of expression, we can have everything. We don't have to be just Wonder Woman or just Batgirl or just Jean Grey or whatever, right? It's you are allowed to express yourself in the range of people. I feel like I'm babbling.
No, it's good. No, it's a lot of good stuff that you said. I always like to end my interviews with the same question, and I give it to you ahead of time to think about. Yeah. Who is somebody that's been a part of your life or career that I could realistically interview for this podcast that would have some good stories or lessons to talk about?
Vince Hernandez, editor-in-chief of Aspen Comics and he is a very, very dear friend of mine. I've known him since almost the beginning of my career. I think the first time I talked to him was 2008, and we were on MySpace. Like, that's how old it was. And then I actually ended up moving out to LA for unrelated reasons and actually got to meet him, and we used to hang out. He's really great. He's very freaking accomplished. He's now also writing the new Zombie Tramp for Action Lab. And he's writing Fathom now, the lead book for Aspen Comics. And but just, he's a really great guy, very honest, very upfront. I admire him. I've listened to him give me advice constantly, and he'd be somebody that I think would be worthwhile for you to interview, because he's an editor and a writer. So it's like he's got, he's running people's books, but also running his own books creatively. So there's a business side and a creative side to it, and I think that'd be worthwhile for your listeners. And he will be launching his own Kickstarter for his own book, Syria Underworld Pimp Hustler, in June, I believe. I think it's June. I want to say June, like June 18th. I think that is, because it's his birthday. So.
Awesome. That was a good recommendation. Before we get out of here, do you want to say any more information about the Kickstarter that's currently going?
No, I mean, if you're gonna have links or whatever, but if you go to www.karnal, spelled with a K, confessions.com, it'll link to the Kickstarter as well. Please pledge. There's a lot of more goodies coming around, and I can't wait to dive into the next arc, which I will be publishing in the same format. The first chunk of that book will be free online at karnalconfessions.com, but I won't be releasing it until after fulfillment of this Kickstarter, because I don't want to spoil the story for people.
All right, and then where can people go online to follow what you're up to?
If you go to my website, sorahsuhng.com, and I'm sure you'll have links or whatever on your thingy, sorahsuhng.com, or if you go to any of the social media, I'm just at Sorah Suhng.
So that was my interview with Sorah Suhng. Links to where you can follow Sorah Suhng and the Kickstarter for Karnal Confessions are in the show notes for this episode at freshthepodcast.com. Another episode in the books. Thank you for listening. Like always, goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.